Canada has been warned next year's federal election is likely a target for foreign interference. So how can those who seek to spread hate and disinformation be stopped? The Public Policy Forum has released a new report laying out some options. It calls next year's election the first critical test for Canadian policymakers, a chance to get in front of these digital attacks on democracy. So what options are at the government's disposal? I spoke to the CEO of the Public Policy Forum, Edward Greenspan, about that. Have a listen. Hi, Mr. Greenspan. Great to see you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Good to be with you.
So what is the problem with the internet or digital world, or the big issue that this report is aiming to address?
Well, I mean, the big issue is around democracy and how democracy is well served. And in the old kind of model of a public square where people knew each other and they gathered in their cities and towns and talked at the bowling alley or wherever they would have conversations, they had a trustworthiness in the system. Today, they don't necessarily know each other, and they don't know who's putting information into the system. The system is open in terms of getting information, which in some ways is good for democracy, because people who didn't have voice before can have voice. But you just, can't know what's going down, and there's a lot of hate online. There's a lot of disinformation online, and that makes it difficult, I think, for voters to be able to make informed decisions. So we've got to sort of get rid of the pollution while keeping the internet.
And I want to get to the solutions proposed to address that. But digging a bit deeper at the problem that exists right now, the report talks about the idea that the internet is dominated in many ways by a handful of major global companies. And how do you think or how does the report assert that amplifies the problem?
Well, I think it amplifies the problem because these companies largely have a business model which is based upon them getting as many eyeballs as possible, taking your data, slicing up your data, selling it to wherever it may go for different people who want to gain your attention, whether for political messages or commercial messages or whatever it may be. So there's not a culture of truth built into them. They're not a culture of necessarily untruth. There's been historically almost an indifference to truth. It's just been a community where people can say whatever they want. And they're big and they're dominant. And big dominant players are always need to be watched in society, need to be thought about.
That leads me to what I thought was the most interesting part of the report, and that is kind of the foundational assumption that there is a necessary role for policy or government to play, and that self-regulation on its own is insufficient. What is the basis of that assumption?
Well, I don't know if it's an assumption so much as an observation. I mean, there's been 10 years of various promises by platform companies, particularly by Facebook, for instance, to different agencies around the world in the United States that certain practices around data, for instance, and the use of data would change. We have the whole Cambridge Analytica scandals, and we have a great difficulty of sifting out the blatant falsehoods in the system. A few weeks ago, there was a Facebook executive who was saying that Alex Jones, the conspiracy guy, who's saying that the Sandy Hook shootings did not happen. Well, that's okay because that's his view. And then 2 weeks later, under public pressure, they were saying that he was breaking community standards. So, there's a real problem there. Now, I'm not saying, and we're not saying in the report, that government necessarily needs to step in. We don't want to see government as a censor, or government somehow or another getting in the way of free speech. I was, in a previous life, the editor-in-chief of the Globe and Mail, and as in that capacity, the publisher of the Globe and Mail and I were responsible for every word and image on every platform of the Globe and Mail, legally responsible. We didn't call the government every day and say, what should we publish? The government didn't call us and say, don't publish this, just the same as with the CBC. But we knew that there were laws that we had to follow. We had to follow obscenity laws and hate laws and libel laws, and be aware of those. And those don't apply in the same way at all to the platform companies.
So how does that affect the role that government could or should play? And I ask because in the same way you describe it, I think there is a lot of concern around, will the government interjecting in any way, even to set parameters, be necessarily a good thing? Lots of people believe that the governments don't always do the right thing, or having government involvement isn't always for the better.
So, the point of government is not to be involved on any ongoing basis. Government is in a democracy what we resort to represent the public interest. And governments pass laws and they pass regulations. So we recommend in the report, for instance, that platform companies should be treated as newspapers and broadcasters are treated. That would require legal change, that they should be responsible for the words and images that appear on their sites, and that they should be subject to the same laws that others are. So that's leveling the playing field. It takes government to level the playing field. We're saying that you should be in control of your data, that ultimately you should be have the rights to make sure that you've consented in a fair way, that you've consented in an ongoing way to the way that your data is used. That is going to require governments to just set the rules. And there's a number of recommendations of that sort. But not an ongoing operational role. God, no, that would be an affront to free speech.
On the idea of leveling the playing field, one other suggestion the report makes is to propose the creation of fair taxation policies. I'm wondering, given that the government has sort of outright at this point said no to the concept of, for example, a Netflix tax, how likely you think that actually happening here in this country would be?
Well, first off, I think it was a terrible mistake by government or whoever decided to call it a Netflix tax rather than a fair to Canadian companies tax. Because, what you have, normally in Canadian government, you've had favoritism to Canadian companies, so to Canadian media outlets, let's say. But here you have, even if you want to have a level playing field, which I'm, in favor of a level playing field, you have an unfairness. Taxes are being charged to the Globe and Mail, to private broadcasters, to the Toronto Star, et cetera, to iPolitics that are not being charged to Facebook and to Google. And they don't pay, they're not subject to the same sales taxes, for instance, that others are. About 30 or 40 countries in the world have already corrected this. They've said, okay, we need to fix this. The OECD has made some recommendations on it. Canada's been slow to respond, and I think Canada will respond. I think the world is moving in a direction here, and I think most people recognize that this is a completely unfair, almost perverse situation.
Before I let you go, I just want to ask you on that note, how does Canada stack up against other countries? The report does look at other jurisdictions and the way they're handling the broader issue of the spread of hate or, for example, infringements on democracy or democratic institutions. Where does Canada stand right now in the mix from your perspective?
So I think Canada is catching up. I think Canada was behind. We've just had a very, very good report out of the United Kingdom, out of the UK Parliament, a House committee that did a report and made recommendations that in many ways are similar to the ones we've made. We have a minority report of the Senate Intelligence Committee in the United States by Senator Warner, which is again directionally the same. We have Germany, which has taken some very strong steps against hate, and particularly against Holocaust denial, and with very large fines for companies that allow that to be propagated on their platforms. And I think there's some controversy about that, and that might actually chill out some sort of speech. That it might be a net that captures just more than Holocaust denial and anti-Semitism. So I think that's something to watch a little bit and to be cautious about following the example precisely. So I think the Canadian government is now taking this very seriously, and I think we've seen statements from the Prime Minister that aren't quite the same tenor that they were maybe a year and a half ago, when there was much more of a love affair going on with these companies. And I think they see the problem, and I think they're actually quite worried, as everybody should be, that there might be instances where the 2019 election in Canada could be attacked not just by foreign powers, but could be attacked by people for ideological reasons or partisan reasons or commercial reasons, that they want to make money, like the legendary Macedonian teenagers, out of the opportunities that are presented by the system that exists today.
Okay, thanks very much for your time, Mr. Greenspan.
Thank you.